Welcome back to Lego by the Book. Today we're going to be building set 375. That's right, it's only 3 digits. That's how old this set is. This is the Yellow Castle from 1978, which makes this set 5 years older than me. And I wanted to build this set when I first started my vintage collection that I was putting up on display in my Lego room. But I got onto about page 2 and realized that I didn't have the parts, which really surprised me because I wasn't expecting there to be parts from a set from 1970s that I didn't have the parts for. I didn't expect there to be, like, specialty parts and all of that. And it turns out, I mean, there are and there aren't. There are some that I don't have any version of, but a lot of them is just a matter of I didn't have those parts in that color. Because it's just not a common color for those parts to be in, and so I wasn't able to build it. And I was looking into getting those parts on Bricklink, but given that some of them were only available in a set that came out in 1978, those parts were either rare or couldn't be gotten or were very expensive. But then, while I was processing Dr. Flux's collection, I saw those parts and realized that he had to have had the Yellow Castle. And he did. He acquired it in a collection buyout at some point, apparently, and so I decided to build it, to try building it anyway. And it turns out I still don't have all of the parts, but I have enough to build it complete enough for display purposes. So that's what we're going to be doing today, and I will go through which parts I have replaced out of necessity, and some other parts that I have replaced, honestly, out of preference. And I'll explain that as well. It is a fairly large, it's got the same general base as most of the later castles, but it's different. It's got 5 base plates altogether instead of 3 like you see in some of the later ones. And in some they didn't have a base plate at all, they just had green plates that created it. And it does hinge, but it hinges differently, and in a way that I don't think makes a whole lot of sense, but nobody asked me. So well, let's get into this, because this is a fun set. It's very part dense. There are a lot of parts in this set, and a lot of little parts. Now, one of the parts that I didn't have, we're going to see here on page 1, were these. Where are they? There's 2. There it is. Are hinges. Now, they're very common in red or in black and gray and things like that, but they were not common in yellow. And this castle is, as the name would suggest, mostly yellow. Now, I was only able to come up with 3 yellow ones, and there are, in fact, 8 in this set. I've replaced 1 with a gray one so that it still has the functionality, and then the other ones I have simply replaced with just 2 1x2 bricks. So they don't have, it's not quite as solid where it hinges as it should be, but that's just how it's going to have to be for aesthetic reasons. And then it is just a boatload of brick. Now, in later castles, we would see the majority of the walls being made up of the big wall plates. And I've heard a number of theories and accounts for why this is, and there may be an official declaration somewhere that I'm just not familiar with. But one of the things that was an early tenet of Lego, of the company, is that they didn't ever want to produce modern war toys. Now they have kind of deviated from that a little bit in some of their more recent lines, but they never wanted to be making war toys. They wanted it to be about creativity, about having fun, about learning. And so they have avoided that for as much as they can. They did eventually have some in some of the Indiana Jones. It wasn't exactly modern, but It was definitely, it's kind of hard to do some of the Indiana Jones movies without involving the Nazis. And since Lego was founded under, I believe, German occupation of Denmark, or at least were affected by the German occupation of Denmark, they had a distinct desire to not be associated with that. And so that's one of the theories on why the yellow castle was yellow. I mean, there do exist around the world yellow castles because of the just coloration of the stone, but in general, castles are gray. So why was the Lego castle yellow? And the theory is that they didn't want to produce a copious amount of gray brick for fear that the kids would use them to build tanks. And so they made the castle yellow. But then, in the later ones, the reason that you suddenly start seeing more gray, the reason they finally, supposedly, this could also just be me making stuff up in my head. They made the castles gray because of the large wall sections. Since the vast majority of the large portions of the castle, the brick, were in fact large wall sections, you really couldn't build a tank out of castle wall sections. Now that didn't stop us. And not having lots of gray brick didn't really stop us from building tanks. We just ended up with a lot of, yellow tanks. And again, I don't know if any of that is true, any of that is verifiable, but I do know that Lego has avoided making modern war toys intentionally. And I'm fine with that. I like the old stuff anyway, pirate and castle. Now I do have a couple of the tanks, and I have, but those were given to me by Corporal Fusco, and they're really cool. They're on display in here somewhere. So much brick. I understand why they went with the brick wall sections. Even if it wasn't to keep us from building tanks, it sure makes the set easier when you've got great big wall sections. We've come across another one of the parts that I did not have, which was this double inverted, or double slope, tall double slope part, which again, perfectly common in black and less common in light gray, but common in blue and red for building roofs. I had none of them in yellow, and that was another one of those parts that when I went to look up, well, what would it cost to acquire these? Turns out those are not common, and therefore can get expensive quickly. And there's supposed to be 4 of them in this set, and I was only able to come up with 3. So I've put just a single half slope one in the back corner that you can't see because of the way it's going to be on display and on the shelf. So little substitutions to make the build possible. get into even smaller parts, because now we're building... That's not actually a Lego, but I'm going to let it slide. Interestingly, there are... Some of the coloration of Lego has changed subtly over the years. If you look at old light gray and newer light gray and old dark gray and newer light gray, there's a very distinct difference in those. And why those changes come about, I'm not entirely sure. It might have to do with just not being the old pigment not being available anymore, or some difference in technology where they discover, well, this pigment won't fade as fast, or what their reason for changing pigments are. I'm sure there is a reason, and I'm sure somebody will mention it in the comments. But it has caused them some trouble over the years. When the shift in colors happens non-uniformly. One of the shifts happened while one of the Star Destroyer sets was in production, and so part of the parts, some of the parts, were in the old light gray, and some of the parts were in the new light gray. And that was unacceptable to some people because it led to a non-uniform set. And you can tell the difference, especially when they're right next to each other. Now, I personally would have thought that having the different grays would have given it more character, maybe? I love the fact that my castle is made up of multiple different shades of gray, either because the parts are really old, or because they are the two different grays, old light gray and new light gray, or bluish light gray as it's called. And it gives the castle a lot more, I don't know if character is the right word, but gives it more realism, because stone is not all the same color, even if it's all cut from the same quarry. And so it looks good in my opinion, but some people didn't like it, really didn't like it. They didn't like that their grays didn't match. And so you could, if you had gotten it, contact Lego and give them a list of all the parts that were the wrong gray, and they would replace them. Which is decent of Lego. Lego has generally been fairly good at that sort of thing. If you get a set and a part is missing, you can simply contact them and say, hey, I'm missing this part, and they will send you that part. Back in the day, it was a phone call, and I've only ever done it once, and it was one of the Aqua Shark sets, the big Aqua Shark command set, and the leader was supposed to have a translucent green hook. And the one, and and that was one of the things I really liked. That was something that was unique and creative. That I hadn't seen in any set before, and so I was excited to have that neon green hook. And then when I got home and opened the set, they were just regular gray hooks, like they were in any of the. There was a regular gray hook, like it was in any of the pirate sets, and I was somewhat disappointed by that. And when I pointed this out to the gnome, my mother, her suggestion was, well, why don't you just call them and see what they say. So I gave Lego customer service a call and said, hey, the set I just bought was supposed to have translucent green hooks, and it instead has gray hooks. What's up with that? And they said, oh, yeah, that was a... It was a known issue, or I don't remember if they said it was a known issue or what their response was, but they just asked for my address, sent me replacement parts with a little letter saying, sorry you got the wrong parts, here they are. And they sent me not one, but 2 translucent green hooks. And since that was the only set that as far as I know, the only set that came in, that was pretty cool. Getting 2. And I assume I still have them here somewhere. Train. They also recently, or fairly recently, I don't know how recent it was or if I just hadn't noticed it before, but they put the vast majority of their instructions, a great many of their instructions are now available on Lego.com in PDF format, which is pretty neat because some of the scans on like brick instructions, or the ones that you find online, are not the best quality, and having the originals available in PDF has sure helped sometimes for me. Mentioned in the Caribbean Clipper video that instructions have changed, and this one, it seems to be they're doing an entire layer of the castle on each page. It's another whole layer, and that's fairly easy to track. It's not too difficult to keep up with, doing a whole layer at once. Things like pirate ships, it can be a bit of a search trying to find all of the changes on each page, because they'll have 20 parts on a page and they don't tell you which parts, and some of them can be somewhat obscure and somewhat slightly blocked, and sometimes you get halfway through the build and realize, oops, I have to rewind and start again. Alright, we have reached the level where I've had to make another substitution, and I already mentioned this substitution. There should now be another set of hinges, just to make the whole hinge thing a little bit stronger, and I don't have them, so I'm just replacing it with 2x2 or 2x1 bricks to so it looks exactly the same except for the little hinge thing, and it's not quite as sturdy a hinge. And we start getting into some larger bricks, because we've gotten through the area that had the sloped bits which were busting up our wall, and then we had windows which busted up our wall, and now we're building along the top, and so we're using 6s and 8s and larger bricks. Going a little bit quicker now. Now we see the first arches. There are a lot of arches in this castle. I was surprised by that as well. I was not expecting to see quite so many arches in a castle this old. Especially since they didn't put arches on the tops of any of the windows. But they decided to put them elsewhere. There's also a genuinely ridiculous number of 1x3 bricks. Apparently, any unit of 3 in Lego, whether it be bricks or plates, are decidedly less common. And I'm sure there is a reason for that on some philosophical level, mathematical level, but there is just an acre of them in this set. I don't actually know how many. I didn't count, because I didn't part this set out in the more efficient way, which would have been looking up the breakdown, the part breakdown on Brickshelf, which is usually what I do if I'm going to build one of these old sets. I'll look it up on Brickshelf, or not Brickshelf, Bricklink. Look it up on Bricklink, and it will have the entire part breakdown, which makes it really easy to part it out, because it says, okay, I need 52 green or yellow 1x3s, and this many 1x2s, and this many 1x4s, and then you can just go through your bins and count them out. Didn't do that for this one. I actually built it as I went. We're also, alright, we've reached another part that I don't have, which is there's supposed to be a pair of doors in the back, and they're supposed to be in red, and I don't have them, and I haven't bothered to try to acquire them, because again, you really can't see it when it's on display, because there's a tower above it, and so I haven't really bothered. Okay, we are, I believe, another layer down. Yep. Okay. We are also about to enter one of the largest areas of substitution that I have done, and this was the one where I would argue it's for personal reasons rather than for not having the parts. It was just, I decided to go ahead and commit an upgrade. Partly because it made my life easier, but also because it significantly improved the structural integrity of the set. And that is the use of these L-shaped bricks. They apparently did not exist yet when this set was released. And they increase a lot of structural integrity. And given that I was missing those hinges, I felt I could use all the help I could get. There is also a lot of them. And the way they are in the instruction is it's a 2 and a 1 next to each other, rather than using the L-shaped bricks, which increased the part count of this set considerably, no doubt. Maybe those parts did exist and they were just artificially padding their part count, or what. There was another place where, like, that was an odd choice. These stairs right here, which are 2 1x2 plates, in the instructions it's a 1x2 plate and then 2 1x1 plates on top of it, for no readily apparent logical reason except that it increases the part count by 2. And again, if they were going for a certain minimum part count, that is a way that they could do that. And they do it in LEGO from time to time. It's not entirely uncommon. Now we build a tower. And it isn't... I don't know that I feel that it is duplicitous in any way to do that, to just use 2 parts when you could have used 1 part, and then claim that your part count was higher, because your part count is still higher. But I don't pretend to understand the complex inner workings of why LEGO does what it does sometimes. Alright. 1, 2, 3. Coming up on another couple of parts that I didn't have. which are the windows. And the parts that they have are just little windows, but they're very, very similar to these parts. I don't know how well that's going to show up, but it's the brick with a slightly recessed stud on one side and a hole in the back. And these, instead of a hole, it's kind of a beveled window shape. And I just don't have anything at all like that, so I have made do using those slightly recessed ones, and then have added just a 1x1 red tile, translucent red tile, to give it kind of a stained glass look. And it works, I think, for what it's meant to represent anyway, kind of a window in a castle. There are some filthy parts in here. And here we see a splash of color. Now the floor, they decided to go with gray, and I think that looks very, very good. And then for the expansion section of the tower, they've gone with black. And again, it adds color. I've recently done a similar thing on my castle, where the expansion sections like that I have done in dark gray. They used to all be light gray. And it definitely just adds that little hint of a little more complexity, which makes it look a little bit better, I feel. Okay. There's our rear tower keep looking kind of thing. Very cool. Now we've got 2 more towers to build. And here they did something that for some reason it struck me as really, really well done. A simple thing that I think made for just an ever so slightly classier set. And I like when people do that sort of thing. Again, it's something that I have done in my castle, and I did it because I saw it in castles in Europe when I was there. And so I brought it back and decided to, yeah, I'm going to do that in mine. And the fact that they have it here in this castle was just a neat little, like, oh, hey, someone else thought of that same thing. That's pretty cool. I'll explain it here as soon as I get both of these built, and I can show it to you. There are 2 little towers. Now we once again are going to expand it, because they like that, which I do too. I like expanded towers. Some of the ways they did them in some of the later castles, especially the Black Monarch's castle, I really like how they did that one. Again, just a really neat use of new parts, and it just created a really nice look. So we have created the tower. And here is the difference. On the outside wall, it has a very narrow, archer slit style defensible window. But then on the inside, it's a nice open arched window. And like I said, I saw those in castles in Europe. So the windows that faced into the courtyard were nice and open, inviting, and you could see into the courtyard, and you could, stand in a window and talk to someone who's down below. But then the ones that were on the outside that were meant for defense were defensible windows. And that kind of little understanding that makes a difference, that is really how things work, is really, really cool. And given that this, this is a set that was probably one that was designed back in Denmark, where castles actually exist, it's not surprising that they were actually aware of the concept of how castles are supposed to work. Here's another area where I have made a slight alteration. There is supposed to be a yellow winch that controls the drawbridge, but I do not have it. So I have simply rebuilt this gatehouse to not have it at all. And finally we get to the drawbridge, which is surprisingly complicated. Actually, oh, and I'm actually missing a part from it. I don't know. Actually has little gates along it, which is neat. There's supposed to be a piece in between where the rope's supposed to go through, and I don't have that part. And then it connects right there. And that is the 1978 Yellow Castle. It would have had a working drawbridge, though you can crawl right under it. That's kind of an odd design choice. And it did have working doors in the back. It does hinge open, but it hinges open in a way that I don't quite understand why they chose to hinge it where they did, because unless, why they felt that was the way to hinge it. It hinges all the way around. Not sure why precisely that was their decision. I mean, I understand the later ones where they were designed to open up so expansion sections of wall could be added in, or it would just create a longer, defensible wall, which this kind of does. I mean, it does, but it creates two. And I don't know if they wanted to pretend that this was a section of walled city or what exactly their thought process was. But it does have bricks that lock the back sections in place, but not the front sections. And it doesn't have the Technic pegs that would lock the castle together, which makes it kind of awkward to move, because if you lift it, it warps in the middle, making it awkward. It's awkward. Let's talk minis, because they actually come in at the end. This set predates Lego horses, and so it actually has brick-built horses from this era. This one had simple ones, and then they actually had a jousting one where the horses actually had barding on them that was brick-built, which made for really wide horses. But what's particularly interesting, and this was brought to my attention by Sergeant Deplorable, I believe, is that they actually employ what is now considered an illegal building technique. It's a technique that Lego designers aren't allowed to use, which is for those ears, they have a 1x2 tile stuck vertically between the studs. And that's a technique that is, like I said, now considered illegal, for whatever illegal building techniques mean. But yeah, it's a fully brick-built horse. And there were 2 black ones, or 3 black ones, and 1 white one. And I unfortunately don't have many of the minis for this, and some of the ones that I do have aren't correct or not in good condition. None of these torsos were supposed to have any pattern on them, so these ones are not the correct ones. That was a later, or from different sets anyway. But that is, they did have light gray helmets, which were later replaced by dark gray, and then light gray came back again much later. They were all supposed to have armor, but I only have 2 pieces of that original armor. I'm going to put you over here. So these 2 guys are correct for this set. So they were blue torso, and the torso is just solid blue. There wasn't any pattern on it. And then the breastplate, that kind of breastplate looking thing, looks more like a tabard, really. And this one, you can see it's not in great condition. Had a sticker on it, which was a red sticker with a crown, and there were 5 of these guys exactly like this with an axe. So I think they had light gray axes as opposed to these dark gray axes. And I've got two of them. There were supposed to be 6 altogether. 5 with axes and then 1 with a sword and a shield. And then there were 4 knights with their squires. And the knights were each in different colors. There was a white one, a red one, a blue one, and a black one. And they would be solid, again, with that color. So all white within the gray body armor and a gray helmet and then a white visor. And then the red one was the same thing except for red visor. And so on and so forth for all the different colors. And then there was the gray one was in the blue. So it was blue torso, blue armor, gray helmet, gray visor. And then the version of this that had the sword and the shield was his squire. So they then each had a matching squire. So a knight with one of these visored helmets, and then a squire with a shield that matched theirs. And they all had their own colors and their own symbols on their shields. And so I thought that was neat, having all the different factions. But then having the one faction that was clearly there was more of them, and they were defenders of the castle. So you could put them on the walls, and then in came the knights with their squires. Since I don't have all of the right minifigs, I have created my own kind of faction. So I had 3 of these guys with the half gray, half red, surrounded by blue. And so I created a red, kind of a red knight. He's missing his plume for reasons. And I have just a plain blank shield, which is actually, I think, from Count Dooku's speeder. But it was the only shields I could find that really match. And then I created a blue and red knight, vaguely matching the color scheme from the Black Falcons, except with a red helmet, because I did not have any of the gray helmets, or any other helmets that had the visor sockets. So these are the space helmets from that era. So space helmets didn't have visors, and so they didn't even have the little dimples to allow you to attach a visor. And I've got a bunch of those in different colors, but I didn't have any. I only had 2 red ones that had the visor sockets, so that was how I went with those factions. So that's kind of how I have my 2 retinues. That's what I went with. I built all 4 horses, even though I don't have knights for all of them. But yeah, that I thought was pretty cool. They will go on display in the collection. Very, very cool. I thought I had more of these vintage knights, but then it turned out that the original vintage ones didn't have any markings at all, and I really don't know where I got the ones that did have markings. Like I said, thought I had more of them, but this is all I was able to dig up. They'll probably, if I have more, they will turn up as I continue to organize my collection. But alright, there you have it. There's 40 minutes of me rambling and building an old old Lego castle. Some of these bricks are clearly from that era. They are dirty and scuffed, and others are brand shiny new. That's kind of what I was talking about, the different colors is you can kind of see, I mean, I don't know how well you guys are going to be able to see, but you can see the difference in newer yellows and a mid-range yellow and an older yellow, and there's even now a bright yellow that exists, and yeah. Neat. Alright. Next. This was supposed to be a space set. Anyway, next I will do a pirate set. So up next I will do a pirate set. I don't know which one. Probably another ship. I got lots of ships. I've got two that I need to rebuild anyway, so I'll probably do one of them. Either the Renegade Runner or the Imperial Flagship. Probably the Renegade Runner, and then I'll do the Imperial Flagship, and then I'll do the Skull's Eye Schooner. Get all the ships in that series. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching.